Hi, welcome back to our channel, where we uncover the most gripping true crime stories from around the world. The world's youngest serial killer children are often seen as innocent and harmless, so extremely violent acts like brutal murders are not usually expected from them. However, sometimes they defy society's expectations by developing a craving for blood early in life. The crimes of the youngest serial killers in the world are some of the most gruesome stories you will ever hear. Harvey Miguel Robinson was 17 years old when he committed his first murder in August 1992, breaking into Jane Bogart's home in East Allentown, Pennsylvania. The out-of-control teenager raped and then bludgeoned the 29-year-old nursing assistant to death, marking the beginning of a horrifying spree of violence that would shock even the devil himself. Raised by a father who had been convicted of manslaughter and a half-brother with a history of trouble with the law, Robinson seemed destined for chaos. Despite having an IQ of 117, one might have expected him to make wiser choices than to make killing innocent women his preferred hobby. However, he didn't strike again until June 1993, when he abducted 15-year-old Charlotte Schmoyer, a newspaper carrier who worked for the Morning Call. After her disappearance was noticed by a customer, her supervisors contacted the police, who found her body in a wooded area near her abandoned cart. Robinson had raped and brutally stabbed her over 20 times before leaving her mutilated remains in the forest. In the following month, he continued his violent spree by killing Jessica Jean Fortney, a 47-year-old grandmother, after the previous murder of Schmoyer. Denise Sam Cole was lucky Robinson broke into her home, raped her and choked her, but she made it out alive by unleashing a series of counterattacks, including biting her unrelenting attacker. But Robinson was a rabid predator who couldn't take a loss. He returned to Denise's house multiple times, and she escaped every time, until she eventually conspired with the cops to use her as bait. A few weeks later, he left a party with his friends and girlfriend to complete his business with Denise, but he was greeted by unforeseen, armed resistance from the police officer guarding Denise's house, and the gunshot wound he suffered during the ensuing shootout, with the officer served as his undoing. The next day, he was arrested in a local hospital, where he was receiving treatment for his injuries. The authorities were able to link him to 3 murders through DNA evidence, plus they also found Denise's bite mark on his arm, and sentenced to death. Though 2 of his death sentences were overturned on technicalities, he currently serves a life sentence in Pennsylvania after a failed execution attempt in 2006. James Fairweather was 15 years old when he began terrorising the residents of Colchester, Essex in March of 2014. Fairweather attacked James Atfield, a brain-damaged 33-year-old father of 5, on the grass of Castle Park. His victim was double vulnerable, as he was also drunk at the time. Still, Atfield put up a futile fight. When the police found his body, he had been stabbed 102 times. The BBC described his state at the time of discovery as covered in blood, with injuries too gruesome to outline. In other words, unspeakable horror. Some say Fairweather's problem stemmed from his inability to deal with his mother's passing in 2012. Besides being dyslexic, his peers also taunted him for his visibly large ears. A couple of weeks after Fairweather slaughtered Atfield, he struck again. On the 17th of June 2014, he killed Nahil Almania, a 31-year-old Saudi student at the University of Essex, using a 10-inch bayonet. He stabbed her in the abdomen, then plunged the long knife into her eyes to ensure, in Fairweather's words, that she could not see evil. During the initial police investigations into the killings, they interrogated some 70 people with knife crime histories, and the perpetrator was one of them. His alibi was that he was at home during the hours of the killings, and just like that, he slipped through the greasy hands of the law. But there weren't many reasons to suspect a troubled, quirky kid with large black-rimmed glasses. The chilling details of the deaths of his 2 victims alarmed the whole of Colchester. Parks were avoided and overgrown hedges were trimmed to reduce the killer's options for capturing potential victims. Fairweather, sensing the heat of the situation, chose to lay low until the storm subsided. However, his plans for a comeback in May 2015 were abruptly halted by a vigilant dog walker, Michelle Sadler. Observing an unfamiliar figure near the site of Almania's murder, Sadler's intuition was stirred by the peculiar demeanour and attire of the individual. Instinctively, she alerted the authorities. Upon apprehension, Fairweather was found in possession of a lock knife and sporting rubber-grip surgical gloves, signalling his readiness to resume his sinister activities. Promptly detained and interrogated, he eventually confessed to the double murder of Atfield and Almania. Further investigation uncovered his disturbing fixation with notorious serial killers, evidenced by his extensive DVD collection featuring documentaries on infamous criminals like the Yorkshire Ripper, alongside chilling reads such as The World's Worst Crimes. Psychiatric evaluation by Dr. Simon Hill revealed deeply unsettling revelations, with Fairweather disclosing some of the most depraved and violent thoughts ever encountered. While his father's history of mental illness and auditory hallucinations was noted, the court dismissed Fairweather's plea of psychosis. Instead, his diagnosis of autism, supported by forensic psychiatrists, shed light on his fixation with serial killers, but did not absolve him of his heinous deeds. The judge, acknowledging the complexities of Fairweather's condition, sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum of 27 years behind bars. Craig Price. On July 27, 1987, Craig Price unlawfully entered a neighbouring residence located just 2 houses away from his own. Within Rebecca Spence's kitchen, he acquired a knife and proceeded to brutally stab her a staggering 58 times. Notably, Price holds the grim distinction of being the youngest serial killer in US history, initiating his murderous spree at the tender age of 13. His reign of terror instilled profound fear throughout Rhode Island, particularly plaguing his neighbours in Warwick, who endured countless sleepless nights haunted by the spectre of his atrocities. Following a brief hiatus of 2 years, Price's insidious impulses resurfaced, fueled by a potent cocktail of marijuana and LSD. On this tragic day, he assumed the persona of the Angel of Death as he descended upon his neighbour Joan Heaton with fatal intent. Commencing with the savage assault on the 37-year-old mother, he inflicted 57 stab wounds upon her before turning his attention to Jennifer, her 10-year-old daughter, whom he mercilessly stabbed 62 times. Tragically, his rampage culminated in the brutal slaying of 7-year-old Melissa, whose skull he shattered before inflicting 37 stab wounds upon her fragile body. The carnage left in Price's wake was unparalleled in Rhode Island's law enforcement history, marked by the grotesque spectacle of broken blades embedded within the bodies of his victims. Upon his eventual apprehension, Price exhibited a chilling absence of remorse for his heinous deeds. Attempting to rationalise his actions, he attributed his motivation to racism, claiming that prior encounters with white individuals hurling racial slurs had fueled his desire to witness death. His case prompted a reassessment of how Rhode Island adjudicated minors within its criminal justice system. While the law allowed minors to be tried as adults for capital offences, this provision did not encompass Price. Boastful of his intentions to etch his name in history, Price predicted his release at the age of 21 due to his minor status, as the law could only confine him until then. However, contrary to his expectations, he spent not only his 21st but subsequent birthdays behind bars. Advocacy groups like Citizens Opposed to the Release of Price, comprising the family members and neighbours of his victims, vowed to disseminate information about him wherever he might go post-release. Captain Kevin Collins of the Warwick Police Department expressed the desire to make Price as recognisable as Madonna or Michael Jackson, emphasising his status as one of the most vicious and brutal murderers globally. In the annals of crime, California boasts Charles Manson, Milwaukee has Jeffrey Dahmer, and Rhode Island bears the infamous mark of Craig Price. State psychologists deemed him unsuitable for rehabilitation, a prognosis further reinforced by his continued criminal behaviour. Following his transfer from the Adult Correctional Institution in Cranston to Florida in 2004, Price was implicated in 2 stabbing incidents involving makeshift weapons, one in 2009 targeting a correctional officer and another in 2017 against a fellow inmate. Despite his denial of parole in 2009, Price's criminal saga persisted, culminating in a 25-year sentence for his latest transgressions in 2019. Mary Flora Bell, on the 25th of May 1968, was a 10-year-old girl from hell. She took 4-year-old Martin Brown upstairs in an abandoned house at 85 Margaret's Road, where she strangled him to death. The following day, she and her best friend Norma Bell celebrated Mary's 11th birthday by vandalizing a nursery school. They left eerie notes confirming their involvement in the killing. One of the notes read, "I murdered so that I may come back." However, the police dismissed these pieces of evidence as products of silly mischief, considering Mary's age and the fact that she targeted little kids. Mary moved on to her next game on the 31st of July 1968. She lured Brian Howe to a garbage area around a railway line known as the Tin Lizzie, where she strangled him to death, mutilated his genitals, and traced an M on his torso. She then attempted to hide his body, but failed. Mary became a prime suspect as Brian was last seen playing with her. She denied being with him past lunchtime, trying to shift the blame onto an innocent boy. However, her lies unraveled when Norma confessed to the crimes. Psychiatrists later discovered that Mary was manipulative and suffered from a psychotic personality disorder due to her troubled upbringing. Mary, who was sentenced indefinitely at Her Majesty's pleasure in 1977, had a tumultuous past as the unwanted daughter of a prostitute who abused her, leading to her erratic behaviour that terrified those around her. Norma, who was acquitted of all charges, was deemed intellectually inferior to Mary. She and an accomplice briefly eluded capture after escaping from an open prison, experiencing a brief period of romance before being recaptured. Following her capture, she was released in 1980 at the age of 23 and granted anonymity, a protection later extended to her daughter and grandchildren to safeguard their identities. Amarjeet Sada, recognised as the youngest serial killer globally, bore a resemblance to Mary Bell with his slender frame and wore a necklace akin to hers. Sada targeted defenseless young children whom he also strangled, commencing his spree at the tender age of 7 by taking the lives of his 6-year-old cousin and 8-month-old baby sister. Hailing from an impoverished background in Mushahar Vihar, one of India's poorest regions, Sada's atrocities continued when he abducted and murdered a baby named Khushbu while the child's mother was occupied with household tasks. Upon being questioned about the child's disappearance, Sada openly confessed to the killing, leading authorities to the shallow grave where Khushbu had been interred. Revelations from Sada's family unveiled prior incidents of violence previously concealed as domestic matters. During police interrogation, Sada displayed a demeanour of apparent indifference, smiling and requesting biscuits, seemingly oblivious to the severity of his actions. Due to Sada's tender age, the details surrounding his crimes are heavily veiled to preserve his innocence. According to Indian regulations, he could not be held in custody for more than 3 years in a juvenile facility. However, Sada reportedly reached out to the media in 2015, indicating he was confined until he turned 18. This implies his probable release in 2016, now likely living under an alias as he attempts to start anew. Partner-based psychoanalyst Shamshad Hussain, speaking to the Times of India, labelled Sada a sadist, deriving pleasure from causing harm. Yet, a former psychology professor at Partner University argued that the boy lacks a moral compass. When confronted with a child as the perpetrator, we confront a moral quandary, pondering the influences that tainted their innocence. Perhaps it's the complexities of life itself. These young murderers send shivers down your spine. Additionally, the Q Crime Story channel offers numerous other captivating cases for you to explore. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with Q Crime Story videos every day. Farewell for now, and we eagerly anticipate your presence in our future videos.